not the same. You don't mind telling the kinds of lies that you don't want to hear. I don't mind the kind of situation where my conscience disappears. Been here so many times before. Don't see eye to eye no more. Here it comes, coming up ahead. Too late to say sorry or take back what was said. If I go, put the blame on me. Caught in a storm. If I stay when I wanna leave, run, everybody run. If I go, put the blame on me. Caught in a storm. Everybody run, run for cover. Tired of waiting, tired of playing with the angel in your eye. Caught in a storm. Your wings are worn out from holding your head so high. You're a bad man with some bad ways. On my bad days, that's no lie. You're the weather that likes to pull clouds across my sky. Been here so many times before. Don't see eye to eye no more. Here it comes, coming up ahead. Too late to say sorry or take back what was said. If I go, put the blame on me.
I didn't start. I basically grew up a fan of music, and we were talking about the Bernie Hayes. Like, the reason why I like the Bernie Hayes episode is because when I was younger, I used to listen to the radio all the time. So I didn't know you had done it, and literally you posted it, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, he did Bernie, like, how does, because he's old, you know, like, you weren't here for that.
Right.
And so I was like, how the fuck did Chan know about that? And so, like, I listened to everything he said, because he's behind some of the shit that I was listening to, and that's someone that my father would know, you know? And you'd hear him on the radio or whatever, but and I don't remember if it was WSL or KTZ, but whichever one, that's, you know, AM radio, like, I would just be in my room listening, like, what is this shit? What is this shit? And as I was, you know, like, kind of young teenager or whatever, what was going on with, like, black music, you had, like, disco had happened, and then you had what they call boogie now, or I don't, like, it's like roller skate music, whatever, but for me it's like Slave and Cameo, and those are two huge things for me as a bass player, and that's like shit that never goes away in my musical library, and that was just my shit. And I think, you know, you fast forward to when I started playing music, and I had to kind of, I was 20 when I started, and it was just a series of these things that happened over like a week, about literally like a week. I thought about this shit yesterday, just because I'm weird. It just came to mind, and I was thinking about, maybe I was wondering, like, I wonder if me and Chandler are going to talk about some of the stuff we had already talked about. Mm-hmm. But when I say, you know, like, basically, like, there's this fabric, these threads that I try never to forget, that got me where I'm at and that make me who I am. You have to go back to, you know, like, well, there's my parents listening to music. There's my grandmother giving me the radio from a bicycle. There's my sister being a big sister, and not even that she was trying, you know, she's probably trying to get rid of me, but, like, the truth is like, I'm paying attention because she's always on the next shit, you know. There's being able to hang out with her friends, hear things like the Bus Boys or whatever, all these little seeds planted. And then there's BMX, which to this day I still make friends. I haven't ridden a bike in a year or two, but it was big back then. And man, I had this friend, Bill Brewer, we call him Binky. And he was a close friend. He lived up in Delwood. And one day Bill calls me and he says, hey, I got a new bike. You want to help me put it together and let's go riding? So I was like, sure. So I ride my bike up to his house. And we, at this point, we've been friends for 4 or 5 years. But we go down in the basement, which I'd never been in his basement. And it's like I used to hang out there a lot. And we start working on the bike, and there's a bass in the corner. And I go, "You play bass?" And he's like, "No, my parents got it for Christmas." There's like a little Roland amp in front of it. I go, could I borrow it? Like, do you play it? He's like, "No." He's like, "Just take it home with you." I was like, "All right, I'll come back with my car later." And before Bill, like one of my best friends to this day, Doug, he always played bass. He had a precision, I think. And he would always try to play the bass, you know, like listening to the specials, like all the shit we listened to. And sometimes he would play songs, and he would almost have it, and he'd leave the room, and I'd pick up the bass, and I'd rewind it, and I'd find the 1 or 2 notes that he didn't quite have, and be like, "I think this is what he's trying to do." And it didn't matter to me any more than that, because he was my best friend. It was kind of fun to walk in and see him playing, but I didn't care to play. You know, I was like, whatever. And then this shit happens with Bill. I take the shit home. Let's say that's a Monday. And then on a Friday, that Friday, me and Doug are hanging out at my place. And my friend Nancy, who's very instrumental in getting me to play, she says, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" Me and Matt and Pete are going to go to this party. I was like, "Oh, I let my sister borrow my car. Like, me and Doug are just listening to music and shit, hanging out. I'll come pick you up." Okay, cool. Matt was a kid that I knew because he was a drum tech for a band called Corporate Humor that I would sometimes go see, kind of modish band. And he was a very good drummer. He's very good, like probably better than their drummer, who was pretty good. And every once in a while, when they're doing sound check, he'd jump on the drums so the drummer could go out and hear the shit. And I think the drummer would sometimes run sound too. And so I knew he could play. And then Pete he was a guy that I knew of because we had a lot of mutual friends. And so they come over and they walk into my room and they see the bass, which at that point I had probably only played once or twice because I borrowed the shit that sat there because I'm too busy riding my bike. And so then Matt goes, "I mean, I didn't know you played bass. We need a bass player for our band." And I go, like, "I can't play. You know, I just borrowed the damn thing." And so we go out, have a good time, whatever, go to whatever party, we come back. And when I'm leaving, like at, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning to drop me back off, and it's come up a few times during the night, and I'm like, "I can't play. You know, like, I hear you, but I can't play. So I don't think I'm the guy." Because the whole time I'm thinking, but I know how Matt can play. Mm-hmm. Like I can't play. And so then it's a done deal. Like, okay. Like,
you're thinking, like, this guy is so good, what am I going to do next to him?
Yeah, and even if his shit was like, I wasn't a musician, so I don't know how to gauge it. I just know that I know what I've seen.
Yeah.
And I've barely played this thing that I just borrowed, and the only other time I would have played bass is if I was at Doug's doing some shit for 5 minutes. So it's just like, I can't do that, right? And so I was just like, oh, whatever. And so I remember at one point Doug was like, "I don't know why you don't just do it." And I didn't think about it till later. It's like, oh, right, because you were probably like, "Tell them I played it." Right? I mean, I didn't think about that shit till much later. Like, fuck, I should have hooked Doug up, right? Because he's the bass player. Whatever. I think I was just so busy.
You don't know any bass players, right?
Yeah, I was just so busy. Like, nah, it ain't me. You know.
Yeah.
And truthfully, like, I don't know that Doug was crazy about some of the people.
He could have said something. That's why he probably didn't. He
probably did it.
He could have been like,
I know for sure he wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
it's not your fault.
Anyway, the next night, my friend Lisa, she hits me up, and Lisa's the one that hooked me up. Like, she's the one that played Bad Brains for me the first time. And Lisa and me were super close. And Lisa was also friends with Nancy. And Lisa calls on that Saturday and goes, "What are you doing tonight?" I was like, "Oh, I'm probably just hang out with Doug." You know, it's like, there's nothing going on, whatever. She's like, "Well, we haven't hung out in a long time. I want you to meet my new boyfriend." All right, cool. she comes over, this kid walks in, and as soon as he walks in, he goes, "You play bass? We need a bass player in my band." And I started laughing, and Doug's sitting there, and he's like, "Fuck, here we go again." And then I laugh, and I go, "That's funny, these kids were here yesterday, and they said the same shit." And then he goes, "Oh, for real?" And then Lisa goes, "Who was here last night?" I go, "Well, Nancy brought Matt and Pete over." And then this kid goes, "That's my band." And I was like, "For real?" And he's like, "Yeah." So we hang out for a few hours that night. He's the guitar player. His name's Alex Painter. And he goes, "Man, for real." He goes, "We're really having a hard time. We had a bass player. He was very good, but he can't do it. I'll show you what to do." And I had no idea if Alex could play, but he was cool. Like he was, like I really liked him. We're friends to this day. And so I was like, and Doug's like, "Dude, just do it." I'm like, "All right, cool, I'll do it." And then what I didn't know, and then what Alex told me, he's like, "Well, our friend Brent, who I had met through the U City thing, was a keyboard player in the band." And so then because I really liked Brent, I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. You know, like I'll go hang out. Like I know Matt, I know Brent, so like I'll be at least kind of comfortable." Because I was a little bit, I wasn't shy if I knew you, but like I wasn't like real eager to meet people back then.
Yeah.
And so, or if I didn't meet them through the right people, I was like,
Yeah.
I was just like weird about it. And I went to that first practice, and I was like so nervous because because Alex started playing and you could kind of play. You know, you walk in and Matt's warming up to Stuart Copeland shit, and Jack DeJohnette, who I only knew because I knew some jazz records. I'm like, fuck. And so then Brent comes in, and what they were doing then was very, very like Fishbone-ish, two-tone, like ska shit, which I was into. Like I love that shit. And I remember Brent showed, because Brent was doing bass lines with his left hand, he goes, "Do this." You know, I'm nervous because they're excited because they got bass player. I'm like, fuck, I'm never going to remember this. And it was so funny because if there were two parts to a song, I didn't know shit about, you know, measures and bars and any of that shit. Mm-hmm. And so they'd be like, "Well, just count to 8, or, you know, 4 of these, or whatever." And dude, I was a mess. Like, I was like a nervous wreck because I was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. And then by the time practice ended, like 2 or 3 hours later, they're like, "What'd you think?" And I was like, "Well, it's fun, but like it's hard. Like it's hard. It's difficult." And they were like, "We loved it, you know, like blah blah." Which in reality, they were probably like, "We just need a bass player." One day you need to talk to fucking Matt about it, because I never asked Matt what he thought about it. And then when I went home and I could relax, like shit started hitting me. I was like, "Oh, as much as I like music, like I should just do this shit," you know?
Chili Peppers.
Okay, Chili Peppers. So the first time they come to St. Louis is the first record. I think the first record had just come out. And so I was kind of early on them because the first time I'd ever heard of them was on this show. I think it was on The Cutting Edge, which is an MTV show where they would basically, I think every band they were showing you was like some band in LA that like maybe LA people knew, but the rest of the country didn't. And they go to this place. I used to watch it every Saturday or Sunday that it came on. And they showed the Chili Peppers. And this shit's on YouTube now. And when you see it now, you're just like, what the fuck? What the fuck? But they came on and they just, you know, they're screaming, they're shaking their lips all over the place. You're just like, what is this? And then at some point they play the song "Get Up and Jump," which you can, that's like typical Flea thing, you know, but we didn't know Flea yet, really. And I just sat there, I was like, what is this? Because you could hear the funk part of it, but it was a whole different energy. And so I just watched the whole thing. And what I didn't remember, because I showed my boys this years ago, and they were both like, why do they act like that? I was like, I don't know. What I didn't remember back then is that George Clinton's in this. And even though the first record, you know what? First record isn't out yet. First record isn't out yet when I'm watching this. Because what's interesting is they play Get Up and Jump, they might play True Men Kill Coyotes, and then they show them with George in the same studio, and they're playing American Ghost Dance, which is the second record. So they're already recording the shit, and the first record's not out yet. But when I saw that, I immediately went to West End Wax, which was this record store that used to be on Euclid in the West End. This woman, Debbie, have you ever heard of this band called the Red Hot Chili Peppers? Nope. And I was like, well, she's like, I'll look out for you, whatever. And a few months later, I walk in and I hear this song on there. I'm like, I think this is that band. And she's standing there like, this record came in for you, right? And it's them. So that's that. But the first time they came to St. Louis, and you need to do like you, Greg Kessler, Jim Utz. Like I just really want someone to do a St. Louis music, especially like the shit that happened in the '90s, but to do like a history of the punk rock alternative shit, that branched from it, because there's so much history here. There really is a lot of history here. But in the people that I just named, and there's plenty of others, but there's a lot of knowledge right there. So there's a whole Clayton U City scene, which is how I hooked up with Sinister Dane. But there are a bunch of musicians from that area that I'm friends with. And they would always tell me these stories about their friends and some of the first punk bands that they were in, whatever. And so I would hear all these names of these people, and there's guy Gabe, there's Andy. Both of them played in this band Blind Idiot God that I happened to be into before I knew any of them, just because I heard their music on the Wash U station, and I was like, this shit's killing. Because there's definitely some Bad Brains and some reggae in there. And then they would talk about their friend Tim Minardi and how he was he was really into punk rock, and he still is. I never had met him until a few months ago. And he was one of the main kids that in Clayton was listening to the Meters and I guess Funkadelic, whatever, but he was one of the kids like, no, you should listen to this. Because there was a whole period of time where like there was a bunch of Clayton shit coming out that was their version of funk, And so I had heard this story years and years and years ago, and then just a couple months ago, a good friend of mine was like, hey, we're getting together, and he's like, Tim's in town, he's gonna come hang out. So I was like, cool, like I finally get to meet this guy. And so then they tell the story, and one of our other friends brings a folder full of old clippings and shit. And so they're talking about all these bands, and then they say, Don, when we went to see the Chili Peppers at that show that I couldn't go to, whatever, I didn't go because it was over 21. And then I found out later that literally everybody that was there was under 21. But they knew that shit. I wasn't going to local shows yet. Whatever. Fishbone hadn't been here yet, And so they hang out with the Chili Peppers after the show, or at least some of them do. And Tim gives them a Meters cassette. And they didn't know that. Like, he played it, and they were like, what is this shit?
Yeah.
And then on the fucking second album, they do a Meters cover. And so I'm just sitting there like, wow. That's just straight,
That's crazy.
And not like they got to give him credit, but I was just like, oh, that's some small world shit.
Yeah, I mean, holy shit.
Isn't that cool, though?
Like 6 degrees of
separation. So at that point in time, we would have been listening to Fishbone's first 2 releases were out.
What year was this?
So Fishbone, when it came out, I think it was like 85, 86, or maybe 86. I was 20 in 87. The first Chili Peppers record was out. I don't know if the second one was out yet. But me and my best friends were very much into like the mod and ska thing. So like we loved the Jam, we loved English Beat, the Specials, the Selector, all these things that had a heavy reggae ska background. We loved the Clash, you know, stuff like that. Descendants, actually, you know, like whatever it was going on. And then I was a BMX kid. Like I grew up racing BMX, which is important. It's like it's really important. It's funny because back then, I think like all my skater friends, that shit meant everything to us. Like it's literally like my whole life revolved around this bike and whatever music I'm listening to and whatever fashion is coming from this music. And not even that I liked everything, I was just interested in all of it. You know, like why do these fucking kids dress like that? Why do they do their hair like that? Or whatever. And I just loved it. And
so you were turned on by the scenes and just the culture that, and that's pretty incredible too. Noticing not just the music, not just hearing the music, but the way they dress, going to the lifestyle.
And that goes back. And so again, and I think everyone's life is this way. I don't know that everyone's paying attention, but like when I look at my life, whether it's last week or when it, you know, like me as a kid, because even when I was younger, I would do this shit like, shit, I guess, like I don't know that I believe in fate. I don't, like I'm pretty normal. Like I'm not intelligent on that level or spiritual. I'm not that. Yeah. But sometimes I look and it's like, oh, this shit's just like one big, like someone somewhere is like knitting all this shit together, and it started here and I'm over here and I look back and it's like, oh, I see all these pieces, you know, and I realized that pretty early, like probably in my 20s. And I made a point, like, to never forget, you know, like people say, well, never forget where you came from. But like for me, it was like, no, for real, never forget where you came from. Never forget those people that helped you. Like no matter how small of a gesture it was, because let's say when cable came on, whatever, HBO, and I see the movie Quadrophenia, okay, and I'm probably, maybe I'm 16, and I'm tripping off of one. I just always liked English shit because of the accents and not just the accents, but their brand of English, like for real English. They got this way of saying things that's really obvious, and it just makes me laugh because our brand of English is fucked up, and you got 4 different spellings for one. You know?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I would just watch it, but the thing that really hit me is like, well, these are like kids, and they're wearing suits, and they got their own transportation, and these cool-ass scooters. And then I remember thinking that the coolest person in the whole movie wasn't when Sting showed up, and he was all done up, but as this black dude who was a rude boy, and he was like the guy that always had the pills, you know, like the drug dealer kind of. But I was just like, man, what is that about? And I didn't know about West Indians moving. Like, I didn't know that shit yet. But I just remember watching that movie, and you see like this, you know, it's a teenage movie basically. And what they love to do is hang out, this group of friends, and they love to go dancing. And that was where my friends were, like, that was us. And so then, maybe 2 years later, because of BMX, I had this kid moved to St. Louis from Downey, California. His name's Roman Roth. He's a photographer, or I don't even know if he's a photographer anymore. Anyway, we met each other at the track because I think maybe my girlfriend at the time and some other friends, we were listening to like Devo or B-52s, and he walked by us to go to a concession stand, and he stopped. He goes, "You guys listen to that stuff here?" We just looked at him like, "What are you talking about?" And for sure, he looked kind of different. He like had all his bangs on one side. He was not like a normal looking kid. And then he came back from the concession stand and he sat down. He's like, "Well, I'm from California and blah, blah, blah." And he's like, "What do you guys do?" It's like, "Oh, we just go to parties and we got this place called the Animal House." And he's like, "All right, well, let's hook up." So, and you know, it's before cell phones. And so it's like, he comes out the first time, and we see his truck pull up. And when he gets out of his truck, he's got on like these tapered pants, and these pointy black shoes, and this knit sweater with a stripe going down his side.
And the culture.
And then he reaches in, and he pulls out this huge army coat, and when he puts it on, he turns around, and it's the Who, Maximum R&B on the back. And I was like, Richard's like those kids in that movie, right?
Yeah.
And so then, I call him Richard because that's how I met him. Roman is his middle name. But so, then I was just like, what's that shit all about? So he's like, well, I'm a mod, I'm this, I'm that. And so then he started like, hit me to it. He was very much into the 60s shit. You know, Small Faces, The Who, all those things, which some of it I already liked because it was like the English kids' take on American black music, which is another reoccurring theme in my life.
I want to connect that.
Okay, cool.
I want to connect. I want to connect Bernie Hayes and his legacy with black radio in the United States, and to how black American music got over there, because he and I talked about that, and I talked about that with someone else too. Anyway, talking about how, you know, Howlin' Wolf, Bill Broonzy, you know, James Brown, like Aretha Franklin, like all of these people went over there. Mick and Keith happened to be there. You know, all of these other famous people started picking up on that influence. Talk to me about the connection that you have with like that early American radio, and then how it affected you, and then how you saw it affecting the rest of the world, and then when it came back here, the British invasion. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Okay, so
how did you see that?
So my musical education is like most kids. It started with, I have an older sister. She's 3 years older than me, and so when I was, you know, this tall, whatever. 8 years old, whatever, we would go get into our parents' records and play them. My father, to this day, he's in a doo-wopper, you know, and he did that in high school. He still does it, and so there would be all these 45s that were all his doo-wop records. But the music at the time in the 70s was like, you know, Marvin Gaye, Al Green, you know, just what Stevie Wonder, all that stuff. But our favorite record was the Coasters, which were, you know, coming from the 60s with Charlie Brown and Poison Ivy and all those kind of funny songs because we're kids and those were entertaining. Then, so that's what got me liking music, like really liking music. And maybe I didn't want to play with toys and my sister wasn't around, I would just literally go put on a record that I wanted to hear. My father was always walking around the house singing. And then when I was probably like 5 or 6, because when I was 7, and I remember this well, his mother, my grandmother, gave me this radio that bolted onto the handlebars of my little, banana seat bike.
Yeah, I had one.
And it was an AM radio. So this was the beginning of me listening to the radio, and it was only AM. And so I didn't know anything, and I don't know that I cared. So I would literally just turn it to whatever was playing. And if I didn't like it, I would change it. But so very early, I did it, like my music was never segregated. You know, it was just, if it was the Carpenters, it was the Carpenters. If it was, we used to have this station called KWK, and it was kind of like KHD, but I always liked it better. I don't know why. I think maybe they just played a little bit more of the stuff I wanted to hear. That's how I learned about the Beatles. That's how I learned about Wings, because it would have been Wings that was out at that point, like Paul McCartney Wings. That's how I heard about that shit. But then right next to that would have been 1490. That was, I always forget which one it is. You had KTZ and WSL. One was 1490, one was 1600. And that was all black music. And then I would just go back and forth, and I would just be eating this shit up, because that would have been like funk and like Parliament, you know, the OG, like all of the music that was out at the time. And so that was the beginning of it. And that was like the beginning of me just loving it. And that, whichever station Bernie Hayes worked with, like that would be the beginning of me knowing it. But then as I got a little bit older, say like 11, 12, again, late at night, or not late at night, but like nighttime, sometimes There's nothing to do. I would just turn on the radio. And I could literally just sit in the middle of my floor and just turn it till I heard something, turn it. And then if you went, it was an FM radio, so like if I got bored with AM, flip it to FM, you got Magic 108. And back then, before the way like everything's homogenized and shit, St. Louis, I mean probably all over the country, but in St. Louis, late 70s, probably most of the 80s, the radio was killing. Like Magic 108 and then Z100, like that's, you could hear, like I said, you could hear, like I'm a huge fan of Slave, like my very favorite bass player is Mark Adams, bass player for Slave. So you could hear Slave, you could hear African Bambaataa, you could hear like they would literally just play this music, and to us that were younger and we didn't know that there's literally like this movement going on, or what, you know, like the beginning of house music is starting and we're hearing Jack Your Body on the radio. We just think it's more black music. Like we don't, is there a label for it? We didn't know. It's just black music. And then what's, you know, Sugar Hill Gang had already happened. And so you're hearing these like rap records, but then you're hearing this shit that's like kind of like that, but they're singing. And then my favorite, like what I was saying before we start filming, my favorite style that we kind of had then was what Slave was doing, what Cameo was doing. There's a guy, Vaughn Mason, and I guess they call it boogie now. I guess it comes from roller boogie because a lot of it was like skate, like you go to the skate rink and you hear these songs. But then what I found out later is like this is what like Larry Levan was playing up in New York, you know, and this is what Ron Hardy's playing in Chicago. It's like, but we have it like almost as soon as it comes out. Like St. Louis wasn't very far behind on that shit, you know. And so like that's whether we realize it or not, like that's quite an education to get, you know.
Yeah.
So Bernie Hayes would be behind that. I don't know if you know Biko Needles, James Gates. His father, Gentleman Jim Gates, he would be a big one. There's a guy, Jockenstein, so this was all the shit that we were coming up, right? And so, growing up where I grew up, which is in North County, I come from this little place called Moline Acres, but it's like, you know, North County's huge. It wasn't rare for the white kids to come in and say, "Hey, did you hear that song on the radio?" And they would have been listening to Magic 108. Like it. I don't know where so much segregation came in, because I think when you just leave kids to be kids, they do like I do, and they're just like, "Oh, what is this?" I'm just curious.
Leads them to
I'm just curious.
And a sound, they don't see the color of it, you know. And it's not in that destructive way, like, oh, I don't see color. It's like, no, you just happen to not see.
They just like it, and especially if they're left alone to do it, there's no one right there to judge them or whatever. But we had it pretty good for that, because we're really, I might be wrong, but we're like the first generation of kids that were desegregated. You know, like my school, like we were desegregated already. You know, and there's a couple kids that were fucked up, but for the most part, everyone got along fairly well. Mm-hmm. Plenty of people got along really well. Mm-hmm. Plenty of us are still friends.
Conditions were not the same. You don't mind telling the kinds of lies that you don't want to hear. I don't mind the kind of situation where my conscience disappeared. Been here so many times before.
Largely this series has been about, you know, how race has affected what is now known as the rock and roll industry. What it is black culture affecting, you know, showing itself and its excellence, and then those in power, those with the money, those with the know-how, market it. They take it. Hey, you should be doing this, kid. you know, wiggle those hips, curl that hair, and then
Yeah.
make that snarl and sing this song.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so how did we get it? How did we get back? How did it get to a point where, you know, where we're playing white boy shit? You know, how does that happen? And then
Well, that's easy though.
Yeah.
That's America, and
Yeah.
the fact that every time they want to make cuts, they make cuts in like, music. You know, like, I mean, I've got my youngest
you're talking
boy.
about school programs.
Yeah, like what gets cut? Music gets cut. Athletics get cut. All the things that are good for your brain and your development. They don't teach real history, or they don't teach. I wouldn't say real. They don't teach enough history.
Yeah.
So there's a thing going on where with Kamala, where all of a sudden she decided to be black.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And it's just
That's
like,
the trend
well,
plan
but
today.
I mean, I've got mixed race kids, and it's like, but regardless, I think there's even enough mixed race kids now that it's not like when I was a kid where it's just like you kind of gotta choose this side or that side, and it's like, why? Like, because you got black people, you got white people. Why does a mixed race kid gotta choose the side?
Yeah.
But I know older mixed race people is like, man, the 80s sucked.
If I stay when I wanna leave, run, everybody run. If I go, put the blame on me. Call in a storm, everybody run, run for cover. If I go, put the blame on me.
But if one of her parents is black, one of her parents is black. And my feeling on that shit is, if you motherfuckers would teach history the fucking way that you should teach the shit, one, maybe we wouldn't have a Black History Month because there'd be enough black history in history.
Yeah.
Maybe you could teach enough Native American shit in there. Like, maybe in the way that some people probably rightfully so are like, why do we have to have something special? It's like,
Yeah.
well, because they keep the shit out. That's why we have to do it.
Shelter overhead, shelter overhead. I need shelter overhead, shelter overhead. I need shelter overhead, shelter overhead. Look, we can try to run away.
But my point is, but then you see these white dudes playing this shit, and now you're mad about it. But you weren't fucking supporting the black people playing this shit, right? And yet anybody can call out Bob Marley, like he's above everything. But I mean, like, for real, were you listening to Steel Pulse? Were you listening to Black Luther? Were you listening to, you know, whoever, Jacob Miller and all this shit? So I think it's a little bit of, we let the shit go, and then the people who love it are gonna love it. And we're saying black and white, but I mean, it's bigger than just blacks and white people. You could have people who only listen to hip hop, only listen to R&B, and if someone said it, Jimi Hendrix, like, oh, that motherfucker can play some guitar though. Not like only knowing little pieces of it. They don't know.
Thanks, y'all.
I had my second band was called Sugar Daddy, and we opened up for this band I liked a lot called Ocean Color Scene. And the guitar player is Paul Weller's guitar player. He also plays with the Specials nowadays. But in, I don't know, 98, 97, they were doing good over there. Came over here. We played at the Side Door. And then the next day we hung out. They stayed in town. They're like, hey, what do you, you guys want to come down, whatever. So me and Jay went. And I think Jay got him some weed or some shit. And we were hanging out down here. They had a hotel downtown somewhere. And the bass player at the time, his name's Damon. And he's also gone on to play for Paul Weller at some points. And we sat there. It was me and Jay, him, the singer, and then Steve Craddock, the guitar player. But me and Damon. talked about music the whole time. And so we were sitting at a bar, and he goes, man, and you were talking about like kind of what we were saying earlier, like people's perception of like black people should, or not that they shouldn't be like, oh, white or black music, rock and roll is white people music or whatever that shit. And the first thing he goes, so Donny Hathaway's from here? He started the conversation like that. I go, shit, not just him, you know? And he goes, right. Like Miles Davis, he went down and shit. He knew fucking everything. He might have said Fontella Bass. Like he knew them all. And we start talking, and he goes, man, you know, it's weird to me. Why do black people, he goes, my perception is, it's almost like we're the trailblazers, but we always leave shit behind. You know what I mean? So it's like, if we started, if you had the blues and you got jazz, and there's always the people that keep doing it. And jazz seems to, I don't know what popular jazz musicians, like what they're making and shit, but there are jazz musicians that I know about, and they, at least in the world today, they seem to be popular. Maybe not like a Marsalis, but it seems like, oh, there's Kamasi, and there's, you know, we got Keon from here, and he does a lot of shit, you know, and I hope they're all doing well, but it's not like Charlie Parker, and it's not like this whole list of motherfuckers that are doing shit and everybody is aware of it. Yeah. Or not everybody, but you know, like enough people. Anyway, he's naming all these people, and he goes, yeah, it just seems to me like, you know, black people kind of move on to the next thing and whatever. He goes, and I said to him, I was like, why is it that all those white kids in England love American black music so much? And he laughed. He goes, I don't know. Like, he goes, but going back to, I don't know, 50s or 60s, he goes, man, he said, what my parents would tell me, and what I think probably still was happening even in the 80s, for sure 70s, he goes, when the boats would come in with the music, the kids would be at the dock trying to get the records first. Mm-hmm. I was like, seriously? He goes, yeah. He's like, as soon, like we knew, you know, or kids knew when this shit was coming in, because it'd be like every Monday, every whatever. He goes, and it was just like you couldn't get enough of it, and it didn't matter if it was like Motown and Stax or whatever, or later, probably fucking disco, whatever it was. But they just have a different appreciation of it, you know. And I think and it's weird to me because over in England, when I talk about shit, or like Oasis, just, you know, they just get back together. But you think about it, it's like, it's not like America. Like, they're on this little island, mm-hmm. you know, and it's like in America, which is why I think it's hard for so many of those bands to make it over here. Because it's like, well, over there, like, it really, you could travel, you could do a tour, like, pretty quickly, you know. Over here, and he had even said, he was like, well, man, you know, like, just getting across a state, you know, like, it takes a long time or whatever. But anyway, like, just they all seemed to love it, and it meant, it's not that it's disposable to us, but in the way that my kids might not really care about some of the shit I was into, I kind of feel like that's what it is generationally. You're always going to get some kids that are looking back. Because like for me, like when my oldest boy, when he told me how much he liked the Chili Peppers, or if you were like, hey, I just heard this new band, Chili Peppers, I'd be like, if you like that, you got to go listen to Sly Stone. Mm-hmm. You got to go listen to George Clinton. Mm-hmm. And when I said that to him, he went and listened to George Clinton, and he came back with a bunch of shit, you know, and he's like, well, what's Sly Stone? You know, there's a lot of stuff, so I play it for him. And there's a part of it where it's like he listens to it, but I almost feel like the production values are like so different than what he's used to hearing. Maybe it's not even pleasant, you know what I mean? Because for me, when I hear Sly Stone, it's just raw, and that's part of it. It's like, no, I like that shit. But for him, that's not how music sounds nowadays.
Oh wow.
Isn't that weird?
Oh wow. I never thought of that.
I
Like
think
the
so.
way such processed and programmed beats and the way everything is so slick that like a 24/8 track, 16 track, whatever tape, raw performance that's not quantized and perfectly laid out and oh my god.
Because
And
there are
it's
James Brown
crazy.
songs.
Yeah.
There are James Brown songs where you can hear the bass is out of tune.
Yeah.
And you just got used to it, and it's like it doesn't matter. It's not funky that shit is, but it's raw as hell. And for a kid who, what's the raw like the raw shit is the first Chili Peppers record.
Yeah.
That is even produced for what they really were.
Holy
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I do wonder sometimes if that's it. I'm lucky because my kid, even though my younger boy, he's not really into music, but there will just be short periods of time where he's heard something. I mean, sometimes they get it from the games they play.
Yeah.
So we're a big Call of Duty family, and maybe not the last one, but the one before that, "Give Me Shelter" was the song that was getting played on the commercials, and they just had to hear it. They then the next one, I think, New Order. There's a New Order song, and so they hear that shit, and I'm waiting because the new one, Black Ops, is about to come out, and Firestarter is the song they keep playing for. They're like, I love that shit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What's her name? What's the Firestarter?
Prodigy.
It's Prodigy. Yeah. The Prodigy. Wow.
Yeah.
Damn, dude, you just blew my mind with that, man.
Yeah.
It just might sound completely forward. The mix and the
I
process.
think some of that's it.
Might throw people off.
I
Wow.
think some of that's it.
Oh shit. Dude, I think that's that probably.
You got enough?
That's great. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. But man, that's fucking great. Well, Donald, thank you so much. Donald Williams, Sugar Daddy,
Sinister Dane, Superhero Killer. Got a new band called The High and the Mighty. Maybe next year we'll be out. I got a whole bunch of lyrics I need to write, but
that's Harper.
that's going well.
Who?
That's Jim Harper, Tim O'Savin, and Darren O'Brien.
That's the thing that you asked me about.